Did you reread the text again after you sent it? The one that only said, "Sounds good," checking a third time for how it might have landed? And when no reply came, did the whole evening quietly rearrange itself around that silence? That checking is old survival machinery doing its job, equipment so ancient it predates language, still reading one unanswered message as exile from the tribe, and no one ever told you it was running. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you where the judge of your worth actually sits, why your own brain has spent years fighting to keep that seat out in the crowd, and how to walk it back into your own chest, so that by the end of this, other people's reactions reach you as information instead of oxygen. But you can't move a seat you've never seen, so we start with the machinery itself, because until you can recognize its alarm, you will keep mistaking that alarm for the truth about you. It's 9:47 on a Tuesday night. You sent the message at 6:12. You know the exact time because you've opened the thread 4 times since. The phone lies face down on the desk, which was supposed to be the discipline, except that every few minutes your hand drifts over and flips it anyway, and there's no banner, and something in your chest pulls one notch tighter. The second cup of coffee has gone cold beside the keyboard.
You are a grown adult with a mortgage and a job you're good at, and your entire nervous system is currently organized around a colleague who is, in all likelihood, watching television with her shoes off, thinking about nothing. Most of us would be embarrassed to admit how much of a night a silence like that can eat, so don't admit it yet. Just look at what's firing. The psychologist Mark Leary spent years studying why self-esteem moves the way it does, and his conclusion, he called it sociometer theory, is that self-esteem works less like a measure of how good you are and more like a fuel gauge for how accepted you feel. When the people around you read as warm, the needle sits high. The moment you sense rejection, even a trace of it, the needle drops hard, flooding you with just enough pain to send you scrambling to repair the bond. That design made perfect sense in the world it was built for. Through most of human history, a person cast out of the group did not go find another group. They died of cold, of hunger, of the animal that finds you when no one is keeping watch. So the brain learned to treat disapproval as a physical threat, and it learned the lesson so deeply that it never went back to check whether the world had changed. Picture a smoke detector wired directly into your sense of who you are. In a real fire, you would think it.
But this detector was calibrated for a world where every fire was fatal, so it shrieks at burnt toast with the same volume it would use for a burning house. The tightness in your chest at 9:47 is the shriek. The unanswered text is the toast. And once you know that, you start recognizing the same shriek everywhere it hides. In the boss's flat fine that you chew on for a weekend, in the post that stalls at 11 likes, in the friend who took 2 days to answer, and the story you built to explain it. To the old machinery, all of it is tribal weather. All of it gets read as the first sign of exile. And the modern world has done something the savannah never could. It put the entire tribe in your pocket. The device on your desk delivers a fresh verdict every few minutes, a reply, a non-reply, a number ticking up or refusing to. Your grandmother's alarm might fire twice a week, at church and at the market. Yours can fire 40 times before lunch, and each time the same ancient circuitry treats a flicker on a screen as the council of elders deciding your fate. So the craving for approval turns out to be a piece of safety equipment, one of the oldest instruments you own, gear that kept your line alive for 40,000 years, and now goes off over a message about a Tuesday meeting. That reframe gives you the first practice, and it's small enough to feel almost silly.
When the chest tightens, name what's happening. There's the old alarm. Thank it if you can manage it. The thing is genuinely trying to keep you alive. Then ask the one question a smoke detector cannot answer for itself. Is there an actual fire? Almost always, there is toast. If the alarm were merely loud, you could live with it, the way you live with a car alarm 3 streets over. The reason it deserves half an hour of your evening is what obeying it costs, a price so quiet, deducted in such small installments that most people never catch themselves paying it. The cost has a face. It looks like the most pleasant man you have ever met. Daniel is wonderful to be around, and everyone says so. He agrees warmly and quickly. He remembers that you take your coffee black, that your daughter plays violin, that you'd rather not talk about your brother. He laughs in the right places, defers on the restaurant, never rocks the boat, never makes a scene, never asks for much. For 15 years of marriage, he was, by every visible measure, an easy man to love. Then the marriage ended, and a friend asked his wife a simple question. What did Daniel actually want? Not from the divorce, from anything, from the 15 years. And she went quiet, because she honestly could not say. Ask him the same question, and you get the same silence. He didn't know either.
That is the wound underneath approval seeking, and it deserves precision. The tragedy of the approval addict isn't that people dislike them. People usually like them enormously. The tragedy is that nobody ever meets them. Daniel had become so fluent at reading rooms that he never learned to read himself. Every time he swallowed a preference, agreed against his own grain, or dressed an opinion in whatever the listener wanted to hear, he ran a small experiment with a devastating result. He taught his own nervous system that the real Daniel was unsafe to show. Do that once, and it's tact. Do it for decades, and the self you keep hiding stops reporting for duty at all, because it has learned that it is never, under any circumstances, going to be called. Nobody chooses this. It gets assembled early, usually in a house where somebody's mood decided the weather. A father whose silence meant walking carefully. A mother whose approval flickered on and off without pattern. A child in that house learns a skill that looks a lot like love. Scan the face, adjust the self, keep the room calm. The skill works, which is the problem. It works so well that the child carries it into every room for the next 40 years, long after the original weather has passed. You are probably not Daniel.
But watch yourself for one ordinary week and count the smaller versions. The restaurant you didn't prefer, the opinion you dissolved in the 2 o'clock meeting because the room was leaning the other way, the music you stopped mentioning years ago because someone once made a face. Call them deletions. One line of you, removed to keep the peace. And understand that deletions compound the way interest does. Each one makes the next one easier, and each one makes the person doing the deleting a little harder to find. The second practice follows from this, and it asks nothing bold of you. There's no need to become confrontational, no new personality to announce at Thanksgiving. Just start noticing the moments you go along while privately disagreeing. Keep a count if you can bear to. The count exists for one reason only. You cannot reclaim a self you refuse to see, and noticing is how sight comes back. At this point, a reasonable mind offers a bargain. Fine, the alarm is ancient, and the deletions are real, but surely the fix is to finally win, to earn enough approval from enough people that the whole system relaxes and you can be yourself at last. It's a plausible bargain. Half the ambition in the world runs on it, and it collapses the moment you do the arithmetic. So let's do the arithmetic. Watch a performer walk off stage after a standing ovation.
For the length of the walk to the parking lot, she is invincible, every cell lit, 2,000 people's noise still ringing in her body like a struck bell. Then she reaches the car. She puts the key in the door, and by the time she's in the seat, a question has already arrived, quiet as a meter starting to run. Was it as good as last time? A high that took 2,000 people to produce lasted the length of a parking lot. Psychologists call the mechanism hedonic adaptation, the reliable drift of every emotional high back down to baseline. Applause obeys it completely. Praise is a currency with no savings account. Whatever you earn tonight cannot be deposited, draws no interest, and buys nothing tomorrow. The most celebrated people you can name wake up needing today's evidence, because yesterday's expired at midnight. The accounting gets crueler from there. Suppose 10 people read something you made and love it, and one person frowns. You already know what your brain does with those numbers. It files the 10 under polite and spends the night rehearsing the frown, replaying it at 1 in the morning, drafting responses, checking whether the frown has said anything since. 10 to 1 in your favor, and the 1 wins.
So look squarely at the rules of the game you've been playing. To feel secure, you need approval that is unanimous, permanent, and unchanging from an audience that is infinite, contradictory, and will forget you by Thursday. Nobody has ever won that game. Nobody ever will, because the target resets to 0 at the moment of impact. Here is a question worth carrying into your next performance, whatever shape yours takes. The email reworded 4 times, the outfit reconsidered twice, the story polished for the dinner party. Ask yourself, if this works, if I win the exact verdict I'm angling for, how long does the winning last? Then give the honest answer. Minutes. Feel that number in your body, and the chase starts to look less like ambition and more like carrying water in a sieve. But the strangest fact about this game is still ahead of us, and it's the one that finally makes the whole theater absurd. You have been performing for a packed house your entire life. Turn on the lights and look at the seats. Most of them are empty. In a well-known experiment, the psychologist Thomas Gilovich sent students into a room full of people while wearing a t-shirt chosen to embarrass them, then asked the students to estimate how many people had noticed the shirt. They guessed roughly double the real number.
Gilovich called it the spotlight effect. We move through life convinced a beam is trained on us, tracking our stumbles, cataloging our bad haircuts and awkward remarks, while the actual audience is busy starring in productions of their own. Test it against your own archive. Somewhere in you lives a moment you're sure everyone remembers. The wrong name in the wedding toast, the joke that died in the meeting, the reply all. Now do something you have probably never done with that memory. Name the actual people who were in the room, real names, one by one, instead of the shapeless everyone. Then give each name a life, because each one has one. A car payment due Friday, a kid running a fever, a text sent that morning that they are rereading tonight the way you reread yours. Inside every skull around that table was another spotlight, and it was pointed at its owner. If you want the proof closer to home, run this experiment tomorrow. Try to remember what the person next to you at work wore yesterday, the color of their shirt, anything at all. Most of us draw a complete blank about someone we sat beside for 8 hours. Now hold that blank up against the hour you once spent choosing an outfit for people who, by this logic, forgot it before they reached their cars. There's a second layer here, older and stranger.
The sociologist Charles Cooley observed that we assemble our identity out of what we imagine others see. He called it the looking glass self. Read that carefully. Not what others see, what we imagine they see. Which means the jury you perform for is largely a construction, and if you examine its faces one at a time, you'll find people who aren't even in your life anymore. A teacher from 1994, a parent, or the weather of a parent's moods, a hallway of 7th graders, every one of them now middle-aged and worried about cholesterol. You have been contorting yourself to satisfy a reflection assembled from the past, in a mirror that was never accurate to begin with. So when the dread arrives ahead of some exposure, the presentation, the post, the party, get specific. Name who will actually be there and picture their actual day. Watch the vague, all-seeing everyone shrink to a handful of distracted humans thinking mostly about their own lives. By now, the conclusion seems to write itself. The audience is barely watching, the prize evaporates in minutes. So, care less. Every advice shelf arrives here eventually, and if you have ever actually tried to follow it, you know its dirty secret. You can't. You were built to care.
The machinery we met at 9:47 has no off switch, and manufactured indifference just adds one more act to the repertoire, the performance of not performing, which is the most exhausting show of all. The people who look unshakable kept the need and did something far quieter with it. And that quieter move is where everything we've built in the last 15 minutes turns. The psychologist Carl Rogers, who spent his career listening to people trying to become themselves, gave the move a name: shifting the locus of evaluation. Every person carries a courtroom, he observed, and the courtroom never closes. Something in you will always be rendering verdicts on what you did and what you're worth. The only live question is where the judge sits. For most of us, the seat drifted outward so early that we never noticed it moving. The verdict lived in a parent's face, then in a teacher's red pen, then in a boss's tone, then in a number under a post. Roger's point was that the seat can be moved back. The question, do they approve, can be replaced, slowly and with practice, by an older and sturdier one. Do I approve, by standards I actually chose? Feel the difference in a kitchen.
A novice cook plates the dish and then watches the diner's face the way a defendant watches a jury. And fair enough, because the novice has no other instrument. For him, the verdict genuinely does live out there in someone else's mouth. A chef moves differently. She tasted the sauce at every stage. She knows what she was building and how close she came, and she knew it before the plate ever left the pass. When a complaint comes back, she takes it seriously. Maybe the diner caught something real. Maybe they simply hate anchovy, but the complaint lands beside her judgment, one more data point on the counter, and her hands stay steady. Criticism can't crush her, because the verdict lives where it has always lived, in her own trained tongue. That trained tongue is the whole project.
and you can begin training yours tonight with one mechanical habit. Before you show anyone anything, before you send the work, post the picture, tell the story at dinner, write down your own verdict first. 2 lines. What I was going for, how close I got. If it's an email, that might read, I wanted to be clear about the deadline without apologizing for it, and I was. If it's something you made, it might read, I wanted it to feel honest, even if it's rough, and it does. The habit sounds too small to matter, so watch what it does.
When feedback arrives, good or bad, it now has to sit down next to an existing judgment instead of pouring into a vacuum. Your opinion of your work exists on paper before the world's opinion shows up, and from that moment, the world is a consultant, never a court. One honest caution. The first few times you try to write your own verdict, you may find the page harder to fill than you expected. Years of outsourcing leave the internal judge out of practice. You sit there with the pen and realize you genuinely don't know what you were going for because whatever they'd like has been the goal for so long. Stay in the chair anyway. The awkwardness of that blank moment is the judge clearing her throat after years of silence, and she finds her voice faster than you'd think. Keep one thing underlined here, because this move is often mistaken for armor. The chef still reads the reviews. Becoming your own source of validation leaves the crowd fully audible. What changes is the crowd's job title, demoted from oxygen to information, from the thing you breathe to one thing you consider. I would love to tell you the story ends here, that you build the habit and walk out into the sunlight. But there is a stage almost nobody warns you about, and if you don't see it coming, it will send you straight back to performing within a week.
Behavioral scientists have known since the middle of the last century that the most compulsive reward schedule on Earth is the unpredictable one. Pay a pigeon every 10th peck, and it works steadily. Pay it at random, sometimes the 3rd peck, sometimes the 40th, and it becomes obsessed, hammering the bar long after the rewards have stopped entirely. The name for this is variable ratio reinforcement, and it is the engine inside every slot machine ever built. Now notice how approval arrives in your life. Sometimes the joke lands, sometimes it dies. Sometimes the boss says, great work, sometimes nothing, for reasons that have everything to do with the boss's morning and nothing to do with you. Praise pays out on a slot machine's schedule, which means you have been sitting at the machine for most of your life, and the machine has been paying just often enough to keep you on the stool. Understand that, and you can finally predict what quitting feels like. The first time you set a real boundary, you decline the extra project, you let the group be mildly unhappy with the restaurant without steering everyone back to comfort. You post the thing without the self-deprecating disclaimer. Someone will be disappointed. A coolness will enter a voice you care about.
And the ancient alarm from the beginning of this half hour will go off at full volume, screaming that you have made a catastrophic error, that the tribe is turning, that you must repair their feelings immediately, or something terrible will follow. A wave of guilt will arrive, and it will feel exactly like conscience. Read it correctly. That guilt is the machine asking for its coin, the old habit protesting a payout it was promised and didn't get. Conscience speaks when you violate your values. This is the opposite case. You finally kept one, and the withdrawal is the receipt. It helps to remember that other people were collecting on your addiction too. The ones who got the agreeable version of you, the flexible version, the one who absorbed every inconvenience. Their disappointment is real, but it is the disappointment of someone whose free service was discontinued, and it passes faster than you fear. You will know the withdrawal by one gesture in particular, the follow-up text. You held the boundary at 2 in the afternoon, and by 9 that night, your thumb is hovering over the phone, composing the little softener. Hope that didn't come across wrong. Happy to help next time, obviously. Watch that message sit in the draft box.
Every hour it stays unsent, something in you is learning that a held boundary and a lost relationship are different events, and that lesson can only be learned by not sending it. Picture a young tree that has been staked to a pole its whole life. Take the stake away, and for a while the tree looks worse. It leans in the wind, it wobbles, and a worried gardener might rush the pole straight back in. But wood thickens only where wind bends it. The trunk strength that tree never needed is built by exactly the swaying that looks like failure. The wobble is not the failure. The wobble is the work. So plan for it, concretely. Choose one small disappointment you will deliberately allow this week. One no, one unedited opinion, one evening you don't manage anyone's mood,
and decide in advance to tolerate the discomfort for a full day without rushing in to fix it. Expect the guilt the way you would expect soreness after a first workout, a symptom of the right thing, arriving exactly on schedule. Standing in the wobble, though, you will need something to hold on to, and this is where most attempts quietly starve. Tolerating lost approval is only half the practice. The other half is building what takes its place, and it turns out the replacement fits on a single page a night.
Two psychologists, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, spent decades asking what human beings actually need in order to feel well. Not what we chase, but what nourishes. Their framework, self-determination theory, keeps returning to two needs that matter here: competence, the felt sense that you can do what you set out to do, and autonomy, the felt sense that your life runs on your own reasons. Look closely at both, and you notice something that should rearrange your evenings. Applause feeds neither one. Both are fed by evidence, private evidence of your own follow-through. The scoreboard you've been checking all these years measures the wrong quantity entirely. A woman named Priya starts keeping a different one. Every night before bed, 3 lines in a cheap notebook. One moment she told the truth when a lie would have been smoother. One promise to herself she kept. One time she chose what she valued over someone's comfort. Some nights the entries are almost embarrassing in their smallness. Said I didn't want to trade shifts. Walked at lunch like I told myself I would. Nobody sees the notebook. Nothing in it would impress a stranger. And within a few weeks, something odd happens. A critical email that would once have flattened her whole afternoon arrives, stings for a minute, and then just sits there, survivable, while she finishes her day.
Her worth has stopped living in other people's inboxes. It has a new address, a ledger only she can read. Or take Ray, who runs a 2-man renovation business out of a pickup truck. After his second bad winter, the kind where every canceled contract sent him into 3 days of what did I do wrong, he started keeping a log on the clipboard under the driver's seat. Not income, kept promises. Showed up at 7 when he said 7. Told the Hendersons the cheaper repair would hold and lost $800 by saying so. Finished the quote he'd been dreading instead of letting it ride the dashboard for another week. Then in March, a big client canceled, the job that was supposed to carry the spring. The old spiral reached for him right on schedule. He sat at the kitchen table, read 6 weeks of his own kept word, felt the cancellation shrink from a verdict on him into an event in front of him, and was back returning calls by 10. What Priya and Ray built has a duller name than confidence and a far stronger spine, a body of evidence. Evidence is the only currency the old alarm system respects. You cannot argue that machinery into standing down. It has heard 40,000 years of arguments, but you can show it night after night, a record that says, this person keeps their word to themselves, tells the truth under mild fire, and survives disapproval without dying.
Slowly, the needle on Larry's gauge learns to draw from the record instead of the room. So here is the last practice, the one that carries all the others. Each night, 3 lines, an honest word that cost you something. A promise to yourself you kept. A moment you chose your values over someone's comfort. Miss a night, resume the next. And on the nights when the honest entry is a failure, you went along again, you managed someone's mood again, write that down too, plainly, without the flogging. An accurate ledger builds trust faster than a flattering one, and the alarm can smell flattery. Think of it less as journaling and more as accumulating exhibits, because a courtroom sits in your chest either way, and exhibits are what courts run on. 25 minutes ago, I promised you would see why your own brain fought so hard for so long to keep the judge's seat out in the crowd. You now hold every piece of the answer, so let me set them in a row. The seat was placed outside before you could speak, by machinery that was trying to save your life in a world where the crowd's verdict truly was oxygen. It stayed outside because the crowd kept paying, irregularly,
addictively, on a slot machine schedule.
And every attempt to drag it back through sheer insight failed, because the alarm ignores insight and answers only to evidence, and until tonight, you never thought to keep any. All those years, your brain was protecting you with the only map it had. The whole practice, the noticing, the two-line verdict, the tolerated wobble, the nightly ledger, is one long message to that old guardian, delivered in the only language it trusts. The world changed. We can breathe on our own now. For years, the judge's seat has sat somewhere out in the crowd, and you have spent your life running toward it, breathless, holding up each day's evidence. Was that okay? Am I okay? The quiet revolution requires no confrontation with the crowd at all. You simply stop running, turn around, walk back through the rows of mostly empty chairs, and sit down in your own chest. The seat fits. It always did. You were qualified to answer the question all along. Nobody ever told you that you were allowed to. Some night soon you will send a message, and your hand will drift back toward the phone to reread it, hunting for how it might have landed. Let the hand go. The old alarm doesn't retire in a week. But somewhere in the middle of the checking, you may notice a new question rising underneath the old one, quieter and sturdier. Did I mean what I said?
And you will realize, maybe for the first time, that this question needs no reply from anyone. You can answer it yourself tonight, and the answer will still be true in the morning, whether or not the phone ever lights up. This is a practice, not a switch, and it gets easier every single time you write your own verdict first. Keep one small promise, and let one wobble pass without reaching for the pole. If this half hour gave you even one honest breath of relief, stay close, subscribe, and keep these episodes with you while you walk, drive, or drift toward sleep, and let the next one keep rebuilding the seat that belongs to you. For tonight, there is nothing to fix and no one to convince. Just sit in the seat. That's enough.